Is your magic meter running low? Well, we've got a cure for you. Welcome to Disney Coast to Coast.
Hey folks, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, the ultimate unofficial Disney fan podcast. I'm Jeff DePauli, and today on the show I have Mark from Yesterworld returning. Hello Mark, how's it going?
Hey Jeff, it's going pretty good. How about yourself?
Pretty good. We just had a pretty massive opening box office weekend for Disney's live-action 2019 Aladdin. So let's have a little conversation about the original and our thoughts on the live-action one, shall we?
Cool, sounds good. And I rewatched it, the original, yesterday just to refresh because I've seen it a billion times growing up, but I wanted to get that, one extra viewing in.
Perfect. So let's jump into that conversation right now.
Grab some popcorn and silence your cell phones, because it's time for the Disney Movie Review.
Awesome. So the 1992 animated film was epic, and I'm old enough to have seen it in theaters. I don't think you were, right?
It was 93?
It was 92 it came out.
92, so I would have been 4, so probably not.
Okay, cool. Well, I remember this movie in theaters, and it ran for a long time, months. And I remember seeing it multiple times in theaters, and it was part of that renaissance, the whole Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King. Like, those were some epic years right there. And Aladdin certainly didn't disappoint, but since you didn't see it in theaters, I am curious, do you remember the first time you saw it?
Not really. It's weird. Those kind of movies, maybe it's because it's same like I can't remember the first time I saw Star Wars or Indiana Jones. Like, I knew I watched them all the time growing up, but for some reason I don't remember the first time. With Aladdin, I just remember it being very special because I had the Sega game. This shows my age. I had the Sega Genesis game, which I am kind of now determined to go back and beat because Sega games were hard. Like, people have it easy nowadays. You get easy mode and hard mode, but back then there was one mode. You had a certain amount of lives, and I remember Aladdin, I would always get so close to the end, and that was like, there was no saving, and so you would just die and you had to start over. So I'm determined to go back and beat it now. But it was special to me because I had the games. I remember I had posters, I had merchandise. I don't know when it came out, but I remember seeing the Aladdin show on ice, and I had Jafar's staff, and so it was a big part of that, and Lion King were huge parts of my childhood. So, but I don't remember when I saw it.
It's interesting that you mentioned the video game because I am the worst gamer on earth, but the only game I've beaten multiple times is the Aladdin game for Super Nintendo.
Was it the same as Sega?
I have no idea. I don't think I've ever played a Sega in my life, but I just remember beating the Super Nintendo game, and literally, I've never even beaten the original Mario Brothers or anything.
Oh, that was hard, yeah.
But Aladdin, I did, so that's funny. And you mentioned the ice show, and it made me think of my mind went to the parade that was in the parks, and I miss those days of a parade themed around one film, because that Aladdin's Royal Caravan parade that was at Disney MGM Studios, and I think Disneyland as well, was an epic parade. You must have seen videos of that, right?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because when I went to this event recently where they had a few, it was the WDWNT Stage 89 event.
Oh, yeah.
And they had one of the former Imagineers who was worked a lot with the parades and the shows and everything. And he was talking about how difficult it was to, because MGM's so narrow, it wasn't built for parades. But because Aladdin was ridiculously huge, they found a way to make it work. And so he showed the thing, and it had Regis Philbin in it.
That was from the Easter parade, yes.
Yeah. So I saw them, but never in person, of course.
Cool. That's fun. So when you went back and watched this animated film again recently, what were I'm going to assume you love this movie, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So what were some of the things that stuck out to you that you're like, oh, wow, this really is special? Because it is funny going back. It's really funny because, with these films, I don't usually, at least the newer ones, I don't see more than once. The older ones I've seen a billion times, but it's been a long time since I've just sat and watched it. So I am curious, was there anything that stuck out to you as you watched it?
Nothing really that stuck out. For some reason, I always seem to forget the beginning. I don't know why. Like with him,
with the Cave of Wonders.
No, the very, very beginning with the merchant and the lamp,
okay.
and because there's the gags are so funny, and the way the camera pans away, and he keeps trying to chase the camera. Wait, don't go! For some reason, my brain always picks it up as the music plays.
Sure.
And I always forget that little, I don't know what you would call it, like a prelude or a pre-something, that sets up the story. I always forget it. I always forget about the whole, the scarab beetle aspect.
Okay, so that was one thing that I really took notice of this time around, because I completely forgot about this.
Yeah.
So you're talking about when Jafar is looking for the Cave of Wonders.
Yeah, it's almost like a piece of the movie it's almost like a piece of the film that they had a storyline for, and then they cut it, so they just included the very last portion, because really, you could have just started it going up to the cave, it had a little fun chase scene, but the scarab beetle piecing together was, I always forget about that for some reason.
Well, that's because they don't do it in anything else. Like, this is one of the things that I was like, okay, they don't do that in the live action. They didn't do it in Aladdin, a Musical Spectacular at DCA. They don't do it on the Broadway musical. Like, this little piece of the two pieces of that, like, beetle medallion or whatever being joined together to find the Cave of Wonders only exists in this animated feature. And yeah, it totally stuck out to me as well. I was like, oh my goodness, I completely forgot about that. Whereas like in all of the other versions, the Cave of Wonders is this thing that exists. People seem to just know where to go to find it.
I will say, and maybe, I don't know why, even though I later got into Nintendo, I didn't grow up on the Nintendo, Super Nintendo. I had the Sega and the Sega, all the other ones. But I remember in the Sega Aladdin, that was actually a fairly important element of the game in terms of, I just remember it showing up a lot, and there were times where you had to get two pieces to form something, but that's like the only thing that I think embraced the scarab collecting of it. And, I feel like there's got to be some huge backstory to that, where Jafar stumbled upon one of the pieces and he had to find the location of the other piece, because it really plays such a minor role in the large scheme of every other retelling of the story.
Yeah, we need a prequel all about it. That's
maybe it's from the lore, because isn't Aladdin based on a lot of like lore?
The Arabian Nights stories, yeah.
Maybe it's something from there.
Possibly. Of course, like the big musical number at the beginning of this is One Jump, which I think does a really, really great job introducing the world. It kind of reminds me of the Belle song in Beauty and the Beast, where she's going through the town with the villagers and stuff. I'm like, okay, it's kind of like introducing us to this world. And I've always loved One Jump. And I got to say, Scott Weinger's performance of Aladdin, his vocal performance is great. And then they've got like the greatest voice match ever, Brad Kane, who does the singing of Aladdin.
It wasn't until way later in my life that I realized that it wasn't the two people, because they do sound very similar in terms of their singing and their performance. Because, could be wrong, was Jasmine's, I forget the actress's name, she was the same, or did they have a different singer for her as well?
No, they had a different singer. The singer is Leah Salonga, I believe, and I can't remember the voice actress's name.
Well, again, it matched up perfectly.
Yeah. So. And so not only did it match up perfectly, but I know in the case of Brad Kane, he actually is not credited in the film. So
really?
Like Disney did not want people to know that it was a different voice actor, which is always frustrating to me. I'm always for the whole find an actor who can also sing the part. There are plenty of them out there.
Yeah, that's really shifted in recent years. Or, it used to be that there was always dubbing. I feel like.
Yes and no. So I feel like what they've done is they've started using the same voice actor to sing the part, but very often the singing is not great. We'll get to that when it comes to the
that's what I mean.
Genie.
I mean, I feel like it used to be that they would do that, where they would hire one person for the performance and another person for the singing. But now and again, we can get to that, but now it's almost like frowned upon, having someone be dubbed, or not dubbed, I guess, just a different singer for the same actor.
That is like a huge conversation, and I don't know where I stand on it, because I'm like, okay, would I rather have two different performers, or would I rather it be auto-tuned? I think I lean more toward two performers. My first choice will always be one performer who can sing and act.
Yeah. But you can't. That's a very hard.
No, it's not. Go to Broadway. It happens 8 times a week in many
I think
theaters.
with film actors, because I think, in my opinion, like stage acting and film acting, even though it's all about, being truthful to your character, they're so different. So sometimes you get stage actors that over project when they're on camera. And so I think it can be difficult.
Sure, but a director can do their
there.
job and direct them to
Yeah,
not
that's true.
Act as large. I don't know. As a person who loves theater and who sees a ton of theater, I am well aware that there are very talented people out there. Now, their names may not be as famous as, say, Will Smith.
That's true. That's the main reason, I'm sure.
But yeah, that's oh gosh.
They need an Emma Watson. Most of the time they want the name to kind of help,
Yeah. Now, one thing I noticed, this is a weird thing to notice while watching the animated film, but do you remember the fountain in Jasmine's little courtyard area that she has? Do you remember? Yeah. How has this not been built in a park? That is like one of the most epic water fountains I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, this thing's kind of beautiful and I want to see it somewhere at a Walt Disney park.
I never thought of that, but that would be a cool. I mean, they have a Gaston fountain. They should have a,
That fountain was really,
put it in
really
Adventureland, somewhere over there.
Yeah. Another thing that stuck out to me was Abu's comedy is just so wonderful in the animated film.
Yeah, and no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say much more so than anywhere else. And, even in the musical, he's not in it. At DCA with their musical spectacular, he wasn't in that. He's a character that, sometimes there, sometimes isn't. He is in the live action one, but I don't think the comedy ever gets to the point that it was in the animated film. Like, he's really, really funny. Yeah,
like, again, I kind of forgot about it. And I know now they probably couldn't do it because there's a lot of people... There's a lot of criticism about how mental health is portrayed, but I found the scene that I'd forgotten about in Aladdin hilarious where he's, she thinks the monkey is the Sultan. And just the way she performs with, oh, hello, Sultan, how are you? And just that whole thing, I understand you probably can't do that nowadays because, it's a very sensitive topic. But the comedy in that scene, I was like, I forgot about how funny certain moments in this movie legitimately are. I'm not a big laugh out loud person, but I was laughing out loud with those. Yeah.
Now, this animated film also made a ton of current references or pop culture references in it. Like, the genie would do impressions of Arsenio Hall or Rodney Dangerfield or Jack Nicholson. And it's really interesting because watching the film as a kid, had no idea who he was talking about. Now, as an adult, I know who it is, but I also know that anybody probably much younger than me has no idea who Arsenio Hall, Rodney Dangerfield, or Jack Nicholson are.
Most of them are either no longer with us or no longer acting or no longer, it's like...
Yeah.
I'd forgotten that too, where it's like, oh, I know who that is, as you grow up.
Yeah. One of the things that happened that we started seeing in the trailers for the live action one was, Genie is blue, but we also started seeing flesh tone Genie in the live action film. And I was like, oh, okay, that's an interesting choice. And then as I was rewatching the animated film, I'm like, oh, Genie does go flesh tone.
Yeah. That's the one thing, for some reason I did remember that. So then when people were kind of freaking out, I was like, there is one point when he does become flesh tone Genie. I don't know why I remembered that of all the other things I forgot, but
yeah, it was the Prince Ali musical number in that film. So yeah, that was something that just stuck out to me. And then so there's this line the genie says, he goes, "You just won the heart of the princess. What are you gonna do next?" And I think that's kind of a play on the whole when you win the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I'm going to Disney World.
Yeah, exactly. If you listen. There's a musical cue that I'm going to assume was on purpose. I'm sure it was, where it just goes like, da, 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 da. It's like when you wish, and I was like, oh, that's so funny. They're insinuating.
I didn't notice that, but I did notice the part when he's trying to figure out how to, win the princess over and he pulls out, Sebastian, you're just da 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 da, just a really brief. And of course, that was also Alan Menken, and so who's an amazing. I'll just say he is one of the best composers. I love John Williams, and there's a lot of other Howard Shore, Hans Zimmer. There's James Newton Howard, but then you have Alan Menken, and his music is so incredible. And all of these Disney Renaissance films are just give me goosebumps.
If you're a Menken fan, I am curious. Are you familiar with King David?
I am not. It's more strict. Sadly, it's more just with the Disney side of things.
Okay, well, this is related to Disney because this was the first when Disney, reopened the New Amsterdam Theater in New York. They put on a concert performance of King David, which was an Alan Menken musical. I highly suggest you write down King David and just go to YouTube. You can find the entire score.
I'll check that out.
It is phenomenal. Like, really, really, really good Menken stuff. And yeah, he's incredible. Even the flops, like, the original Newsies film. I'm like, it's such good music. It's contagious. So
I'm glad they brought him back for these. It makes sense rather than hiring some brand new composer and trying to
Well, they kind of bring him back. There's like a billion composers involved with Aladdin at this point. Originally it was Alan Menken and Howard Ashman. Then Howard Ashman passed away, so I believe it was Tim Rice who was brought on. And then Pasek and Paul. And there's a lot of composers and musicians involved with Aladdin at this point. But yes, at the heart, it's Alan Menken, I would say.
Right.
So it's pretty cool. I was watching the Whole New World sequence, which of course is a great song from the film, and I did think to myself, I'm like, at what point are we gonna get soaring around a whole new world in the parks? Like, at some point that's gonna happen because it just kind of fits so perfectly. I'm like, they're going around the world, and I'm not saying I want that. I'm just saying I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
So. But yeah, that animated film, it's classic. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we get to the main topic of this live-action remake?
I'm trying to think. I mean, other than I think it holds up
yes,
well.
Agreed.
Very well. And to me, even though The Lion King is my favorite Disney animated film, I guess I would say I feel like maybe narratively Aladdin's a little stronger, more so in the ending, because one of my only complaint with The Lion King is how kind of rushed the ending is, where it's like, oh, he killed Mufasa, and then 30 seconds later it's like, no, you tell them you killed Mufasa. Like, it's just very rushed. But I feel like Aladdin has just a very strong narrative, and the characters are very unique. Not that Lion King isn't, but it's just, I don't know, I feel like they really did hit a home run with both, but Aladdin does have, you know what I mean? It's like, they're both amazing. Lion King's my personal favorite, probably because of the music alone, but just structurally, and even with the third act, I feel more tension, I guess, in certain ways. Like, there's real urgency going on, as Jasmine's in the hourglass, and with Genie not understanding why Aladdin made him make the wish. And I just feel like there's, that really great such a sense of tension that you don't always see in kids' movies nowadays. Like, where you as an adult audience member are getting involved in what's going on. Sometimes it's more just like, shenanigans versus actual real danger. And I appreciate the fact that it went there, and he's like so terrifying when Jafar becomes a genie. And yeah, just a great Disney animated film. It's number 2. Number 1's The Lion King for me, but Aladdin's a very close second.
That's interesting. My number 1 is Mermaid. Number 2's Beauty and the Beast. And then, I don't know, they probably go in order for me. Although Lion King is so spectacular. I don't know. You can't go wrong with the 4 Renaissance films. To me, that's where it ends. I know, like, Rescuers Down Under was in there somewhere, but
I love Beauty and the Beast, and for some reason, I never gravitated towards Little Mermaid for whatever reason as a kid. I know I watched it a lot. I think it was more of my sister's movie. I was more of the Lion King, Aladdin. She was more of the Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid.
Well, that makes sense. Those are quote unquote, typically girl movies, whereas Aladdin, Lion King are quote unquote boy movies. So.
Yeah, and Beauty and the Beast is kind of a middle ground because you have more of the, Gaston and all that stuff. But
sure.
Yeah, those 4 and are just, that it really was a renaissance, or, they call it like the Renaissance, the Disney Renaissance era, because they just, were known for such amazing animations, and then they had a really dry spell, and then they had that just hit after hit after hit, and it's just crazy. You don't really see that nowadays.
Very much because of Alan Menken and Howard Ashman. But in any case, let's talk about this 2019 live-action remake starring Will Smith as the genie. Of course, Robin Williams was the genie in the original film, and it's kind of an untouchable performance at that point. But, this live action remake is so interesting, I think, because so many people were worried about it. A lot of people love the Aladdin animated film. Like, it's a lot of people's favorites, I would say. And so when they started coming out with the trailers and stuff, reaction was not very good.
No, yeah.
Yet this past weekend, the numbers were huge, and the reaction, for the most part, has been surprisingly good. I would put myself in that camp of, not loving the trailers, but really having a good time at the movie. I had some issues with the movie, but I had a really good time. Like, I was sitting there and I was kind of like smiles the whole time. What was your overall feeling toward it?
Overall, I think the best way I can summarize it is a mixed bag. I know that's kind of a cliched critic thing to say, but there were parts where I really got into it and I was very immersed, and we can get in, I'm sure the specifics of performances and everything. There were times when I was really into it and I really enjoyed it, and then there were other times when I was not so much.
What were you expecting going in? Were you like ready to love it because you'd heard good things, or were you like, no, these trailers really worry me? Like, where was your headspace going into the theater?
The first trailer, I forget the order they came out. I know, like, the first trailer, I wasn't too impressed with the genie. Will Smith as Genie. I was really skeptical based on how he looked. I guess I went in not kind of like very level-headed, because it's not like I wasn't prepared to love it, hate it. I don't know how to explain it. I always try to go in with the movie with, hope for the best, but I don't know how to. I'm trying to think how to phrase it better.
I know what you're saying. You go in hoping for the best result, but cautious that, it may not.
Yeah, especially with these. Like, most movies, I don't go in, hoping for the best, expect the worst. But with these, I'm very cautious, because it is a very, very difficult task to adapt in, a movie that's so beloved by so many people into live action. And that's one thing I'll say that I'll give them probably the most credit, is that if you change too much, people get upset that you're changing too much from the source material. If you change too little, then people will complain and say, oh, you're just retreading the same narrative. I think they got the balance as good as they could, where they didn't change. They changed enough to make it unique, but they didn't change too much to where you're like, this isn't my Aladdin. Okay. So I will say I think they got the balance really well. I guess my issues are more specific things, but overall, like, I enjoyed it. I guess I would say overall as the whole package, because there were parts in the first 20 minutes I had issues with, and the last act, it was like the first and the last act I had issues with, but that middle section, pretty much once he gets to the Cave of Wonders to almost the end, I really enjoyed. And now, in comparison to Beauty and the Beast, I would say I probably enjoyed it more, because I love the musical numbers from Aladdin. I would say maybe Beauty and the Beast was better made, but I think I enjoyed Aladdin more, and that might be from the personal bias of just, once I got past some of my issues, I was able to just kind of go along for the, as corny as go along for the ride, and it really wasn't until the end where I had more issues. I'm rambling because it's just hard to maybe I need to see it again, because even if you have no expectations, you're still having expectations. So
you didn't dislike it that much if you're willing to go see it again, I guess.
No, I didn't. I guess I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I enjoyed parts of it. Yeah. Overall, I enjoyed it. But I didn't walk away disappointed. I just had, quite a few issues. But I would recommend it for anyone. It's like I wouldn't tell anyone not to go see it. That's, I guess, a good way to put it.
Yeah, I always wonder when I walk out of a movie, I'm like, am I going to want to own that? Am I going to want to purchase a digital download of that film? And I was like, I think I actually might for Aladdin. I was also kind of going in having just recently seen Dumbo.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of wondering whether or not I would like it more than Dumbo, and I did like it more than Dumbo, and I really wasn't expecting to. Let's just start right at the beginning, though. I am going to spoil something if you haven't seen it yet, so sorry about that. But I kind of like the fact, let's think back at the original animated film for a second, and the first character we see is that peddler riding through the camel through the desert, and then the singing voice of that character is actually Bruce Adler, but then when it's just the character speaking to camera, it's Robin Williams.
Right.
So I think it was kind of cool how that character, the version of that for the live action film was Will Smith, aka the genie. Like it was just parallel with how they did it in the animated film, even though there were different characters kind of.
Right.
I thought that was a very kind of, I was like, okay, cool. It's just like the animated movie. We get the same actor playing this role. And of course, we got the really nice payoff at the end of the film, spoiler, where you find out that like basically it is the genie, and you know it's the free version of the genie and his family. So I thought that was pretty cool. But I gotta say, the second he started singing Arabian Nights, I got so worried because I thought it was a horrifically bad performance of that song.
Okay, at least I'm not the only the only one who thought that. I don't know if I'd go as far as horrifically bad, but I was kind of like, oof.
It was so auto-tuned and gross. I couldn't even. And I gotta be honest, like I know Will Smith isn't a singer, but I also know he has like a music background. So I expected him. I am not a Will Smith fan. I'll just put that out there. He drives me up the wall. Like even watching an interview with him, I'm just not a fan. So him as the genie to start off is like a huge negative in my mind. The fact that I enjoyed the film as much as I did with him in that role, I think says a lot about the film.
See, for me, I was like, when they cast him, I thought, okay, that's a good choice. Because I wouldn't say like, I'm not going to take him or leave him depending on the movie. Like there are a few actors where I'll just see anything they're in, you know, but with Will Smith, I've seen a lot of movies where I love him in it. I've seen quite a few. There's not many I haven't seen that I disliked him. I think what the After Earth was probably the worst thing I've ever seen any actor in. But overall, I enjoy Will Smith. So when he was chosen, I was like, okay, good choice. He has big shoes to fill, but I don't know who would have.
It's an impossible task to fill those shoes. Yeah, I would have preferred. Here's my number one option. Actually, this is interesting because they just did this recently with Toy Story 4, where Don Rickles has passed away, the voice of Mr. Potato Head, and they went back and they found a bunch of audio from outtakes and stuff from the original films that he did, and they basically used his voice for Mr. Potato Head in Toy Story 4. Now, I get it. Mr. Potato Head is a much smaller character in those films than the genie and Aladdin. But I would be okay with them reusing some of the vocal performance already from the animated film. That wouldn't bother me if it was the same thing. I mean, we're essentially getting that with Mufasa and The Lion King. And from what I hear, people are very happy to have James Earl Jones back performing that role.
And you know there's a lot of extra, because part of the whole lore about Aladdin is that he would go and go and go and go and go. And they almost... he would do such great material that they had too much to figure out like what to use. So, you know, there's a backlog of hours, I'm sure, of him improving, you know?
Exactly. So between the stuff that was in the animated film and unused footage, I 1,000% wish that they had just used him and made Genie a CG character. Like,
but then would it have been a Grand Master Tarkin situation, you know, where it's like, well, he's dead, he didn't give it his approval.
I'm not saying make Robin Williams CG, make the character, like make him look like a version of the Genie from the animated film.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
So
that would have been a very interesting choice, and people probably would have been 100% on board with that. And thought of that.
I don't know if they would. I think that there would have been. I mean, honestly, they probably would have had to get permission from Robin Williams' family. Right. Maybe they did try to do this and they got a no. Who knows?
That would be interesting.
But on top of that, I could see it going one of two ways. I think it would be an interesting choice. Apparently, you do as well. But I could see people out there being like, no, like, what's the point of remaking it then?
Yeah.
And I mean,
well, like you said, and kind of like what I said, where with these live action remakes, it is kind of a lose-lose. I think with Lion King especially.
Yeah.
I'm going into that one. I really don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
Because I love that movie so much, but it's a lose-lose. You change too much, and I'll be like, this isn't, where's my favorite scene recreated? But then you don't change enough, and then all the critics will be like, this is just the same, but updated with, it's like a video game remaster. So it's a hard task.
Yeah, and listen, this past weekend, I think everybody who was not a fan of these live-action films, first of all, if you're not a fan of them, I'm pretty indifferent about them. Like, I get the complaint. I also enjoy them for the most part. So I get both sides. But if you're not a fan, don't pay to go see them because they will keep making them if you're paying to go see them. And I think a lot of people who are not a fan of them maybe saw the box office for Dumbo. I was like, yeah, it's going to be the end for these live action remakes.
It's only the beginning.
Oh, Aladdin did so well, like way better than they even expected it to. And they're talking huge expectations for Lion King.
I don't think theater, because I think I mentioned to you when I got my seats, and it was like only a couple days before the entire auditorium was empty. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up changing the date to a Saturday. And again, the auditorium was entirely empty when I went to buy the ticket. So I was like, oof. But then when I went there, it was full, which is weird. So I think word of mouth maybe, or not word of mouth, because obviously that was, I don't know, maybe just families were like, let's go see Aladdin.
Yeah, I mean, it was Memorial Day weekend. It's not really an event film. It's not one where you're like, oh, tickets are on sale, I got to get them now. It's not Star Wars or Avengers.
They're going to spoil it for me on the internet. I got to see how Aladdin ends before people ruin it.
So I just think that that's one of those films where, like, people show up that weekend, and, it was Memorial Day weekend, so that certainly helped, the long weekend. And yeah, it did really, really well. So they're clearly not going anywhere. But yeah, Will Smith is the genie. That was my biggest complaint about the film. He just wrote
about like as the final product.
Oh yeah.
Or do you mean the casting? Okay.
The casting of him,
because that was my highlight of the.
I know, which is why I saw you tweet that, and I said to you, "Oh, we're gonna have an interesting conversation," because you thought that was the best part, and I was absolutely. To me, I was just like, I've got to just accept the fact that he's the genie and move past that. But like everything he did, I was just
was it because I've heard a complaint personally. I don't agree. But a lot of people thought when he was ad-libbing that it felt forced. Are you in that camp?
I wouldn't disagree with that statement, but my whole thing with Will Smith is he just comes across, sorry to any Will Smith fans out there, I might get some hate mail here, but he comes across as the most arrogant human being on earth. And it's just such a turnoff to me that I cannot look past it. And I feel like all of his characters are that way. Now, to be fair, perhaps that's a trait appropriate for the genie, but yeah. I just can't buy into it. And then, like, literally when one of the first things he did was sing Arabian Nights, and I thought the performance was horrible.
Yeah, that threw me off.
I was just like, well, this is not getting any better.
Because for a second, it reminded, I don't know why, but for some reason I was like, oh yeah, he sings. He's sang, and then as he was singing, I'm like, oh no, he's only rapped before. Yep. That's right. Yeah, I'd kind of forgot. Like, yeah, he's not. It was only really that first song though, that is like he wasn't quite hitting the notes. It seemed, or maybe it was rough. For me, it's funny you mentioned. Yeah, so overall, it's funny because that was my highlight. Because I guess maybe it's because I knew that there's no way he could live up to Robin Williams or anyone really. So I was just on board with what he did. I thought the jokes were pretty funny. Like anytime they did kind of fourth wall breaking stuff, which they do in the cartoon, I was on board. But again, I'm coming from, I don't hate Will Smith. I've always kind of...
Did I say hate? I didn't mean to say hate. I just greatly dislike.
Strongly dislike. Not to put words in your mouth. But so I've never been like I like him overall. He's a very charismatic actor, but it's very dependent on the role. But in general, I do enjoy Will Smith as a performer.
The one thing I'll say about casting him as the genie is I think it was smart in the respect that, like, you cannot replace Robin Williams. So yeah. I'm happy they didn't try to do that. They were smart enough to know, like, it's just like, if I were a comedian, I wouldn't want to take on that role because, like,
oh yeah,
I'm going to be compared to Robin Williams, So, they went after a rapper. So,
is there anyone in your opinion tossing aside the, bring Robin Williams is
Sure.
So do you think there's anyone that's working today that would have had the same like draw? Because obviously they had to get someone that had draw, because the other two actors and actresses are pretty unknown for the most people. So they needed that one actor who brought people in. Do you think there's anyone working in the industry that could have done it?
I have a very weird person to mention.
Christopher Walken.
and musically, I don't know if he could do it. I've never heard him sing, although I have heard that this actor, actually, he probably can sing, because I've heard he is in consideration to play the devil on Broadway in Damn Yankees. I don't know whether or not that production's actually going to happen. Do you have any idea who I'm talking about?
No, I'm not much of aside from Disney movies, my musical knowledge outside of that and Phantom of the Opera is pretty limited.
Okay. Bryan Cranston, I think would be interesting for a couple reasons. Number one, I actually just remembered the fact that they were trying to get him to play the devil in Damn Yankees, so I'm going to assume he auditioned to sing and that it was acceptable enough. If Will Smith can do it, I'm going to assume Bryan Cranston could have sung it. I think he's a brilliant actor, and I also think he's so brilliant these days in such dramatic roles, people are forgetting how hilariously funny he was in Malcolm in the Middle.
I'm actually it's funny you mentioned that, because I was telling my girlfriend yesterday, I'm like, I'm going to start watching it because I've never seen it, and I just keep seeing all these
They're putting it on
memes
Disney
everywhere.
Plus. Yeah,
it's on Hulu, so I might give it a run through, because I always see these GIFs and memes, and they're all of him. I'm like, I gotta give this show a try because it looks hilarious.
Maybe it was Hulu then. I thought it was Disney Plus, but maybe, I don't know. Maybe they're switching it.
They're probably taking it off of Hulu, and so I'll have to
possibly
switch over. That would be an interesting choice. I think the only thing would be the age and whether he's charismatic enough.
Oh, watch Malcolm in the Middle as far as charisma is concerned, but. I think he's a brilliant actor. I would have loved to. I don't even know why he popped into my mind. But I was thinking, I was like, I don't want a comedian to replace Robin Williams, but I want somebody whose performances I enjoy. And Bryan Cranston popped in my mind, and I was like, I think that would be interesting.
At least they didn't go with Seth Rogen. I would have been kind of in your shoes, where I love Seth Rogen, but I cannot see him as a genie just being like every 5 seconds. So, although I do like his, what is he? I think he's playing Pumbaa.
Yes.
I think that's a good choice.
Yes.
But as like Genie, I wouldn't have ever.
Yeah.
But yeah, my thing is I just can't see anyone else. So I thought Will Smith is the best they could. Or not the best they could. I personally was like, I was okay with it.
Yeah.
I don't know why they had to give him, this big bodybuilder CGI. That was actually my biggest, not to jump ahead, but even from the trailers, that was my biggest thing, was like, yeah, he kind of looked like a floating CGI face, but like, why do they have to make him so huge and bulky? Like, save a little money on CG, just have him train a little and maybe put some prosthetics on him, kind of like Hellboy or something.
I mean, he's a genie, right? He's going to be larger than life, I guess. But speaking of casting, I gotta say, I thought, and gosh, shame on me for not having his name in front of me here, but the actor who played Aladdin, I thought was so charming and so likable, and I'm pretty sure you disagree with me.
I would say in the comedic scenes, yes, or the more lighthearted stuff. Really, the weird thing, I'll just say, like, up until, again, not to jump ahead, up until he gets kidnapped, spoilers, kidnapped by Jafar, I wasn't buying anything. I didn't like any of the performances. I didn't like any of the singing up until that point. I didn't like the pacing.
Even in one jump?
No. The singing was fine, but I didn't like, and that's a whole other thing, was I didn't like how they rearranged the beginning, where that should have been before we're introduced to Jasmine. So we're setting up his character before leading to Jasmine, but instead we're thrown right into, who are these people? Oh, there's a girl in the marketplace. But that, I know you'll get into that, but I think he did well later on. It's almost like maybe he grew on me a bit. But in terms of the dramatic stuff, I really thought he was pretty wooden. I thought pretty much, I know I'm going to sound a horrible person, but because a lot of it can do with writing, a lot of it can do with editing. As an editor, I know you can have someone, like, every great actor has bad takes or bad performances, just like every bad actor has great takes. So it could be directing, it could be the writing, it could be a numerous amount of things. So I'm not saying like they're bad actors or by any means, because I'm sure they're terrific. I'm sure everyone in this movie is a terrific actor and actress. But I just felt overall, it was just, when it came to the dramatic stuff, it was just, everyone just felt very wooden to me and stilted and almost like I was watching a rehearsal.
Okay.
But I would say he's I would give that point that he had that charming, he had a very charming smile in the scenes with him and Jasmine, aside from on the rooftop, which that was where I was like, this feels like I'm watching a stage play, like a theater production at high school of interpretation of Aladdin. But later on, I don't know if it grew on me, but then I was like, okay, like the whole jams thing had me actually laughing pretty far later in the movie.
Yeah, now I do want to mention the actor's name is Mina or Mena Massoud, and Jasmine is Naomi Scott, just because. Oh, and Jafar is Marwan Kanzari. So sorry for
that was my biggest issue.
Now that's interesting, and I want to get into that. But God, there's so much to talk about here. So with Aladdin, for a sec, it's a tough role, and Scott Weinger did it beautifully vocally as well. And in the animated film,
perfect.
What was that?
Oh, he's perfect. Yeah,
but it's tough because, like, let's think about it. The first thing we're really introduced to about that character is the fact that he's a thief, right? Now, he's a thief for the right reasons, but at the same time, it's like, this guy does not do right, yet we still kind of love him immediately, So it's...
But how much is that, and this is part of the other thing, how much is that from you knowing the animation versus, because I talked to someone who had never seen the animation and they saw this the first time.
Which I bet was confusing for them, which is a whole other thing.
He was confused. Yeah. He didn't like anyone, he didn't like anyone, because I think the filmmakers relied so much on and growing up with Aladdin that they didn't feel the need, hence why they skip over like the first 20 minutes of the movie. They didn't feel the need to build the character of Jasmine, the character of Aladdin, before we're introduced to them as like as doing the song numbers. That was one of my biggest issues at first, was just looking at it from someone, because when I go into a movie like this, I try to leave my notions and my feelings and what I know about the cartoon, because I feel like it should stand alone.
Yes.
I was like, if I didn't know the cartoon, I'm sure 99% of people seeing it have grown up with it.
Yep.
But I would be like, who are these people? Why should I care? Why am I just thrust into the middle of who's that? Like, I would have been so thrown off.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, our introduction to Aladdin in the animated film is one jump ahead as well.
Right.
But the thing that I think was really, I saw this.
But that came before he met Jasmine. That was my thing.
Okay.
Where we learn who he is through that song and through a few moments before we get to Jasmine. Whereas in the movie, we're kind of just rushed with them pretty close together, and we don't get to even see her character background at first. It's just, there she is,
Yeah. So I don't disagree with you in as far as like the whole rush in the opening, and most specifically in my notes I wrote Cave of Wonders. Was it confusing? Because as a person who knew it, I knew exactly what was going on, but like there is no explanation of the Cave of Wonders whatsoever. It's so skipped over so quickly, and I was just like, if you're not familiar with this story, I can't imagine that what's going on here.
Yeah, that's why I say, like, once Jafar kidnaps Aladdin, I was on board for most of the movie, in case anyone thinks I'm going to, crap on the entire thing. No, it was just that first 20 minutes felt like a train just kind of not getting up to speed, and I was like, I need to get on board soon or I'm going to check out. Luckily it did at a point, but that was one of them where I thought, okay, again, if I didn't know the animation, I'd be like, what is going on with this cave, and it ate this guy, and who's the diamond? Like, I would have been confused.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, earlier we were talking about using Robin Williams' voice for the genie in this remake. Well, I guess I'm happy to say, once again, Frank Welker is the voice of the Cave of Wonders, which is such And I can't imagine any other voice as the Cave of Wonders. And I was watching the film, like, this sounds exactly like the animated film. So I looked it up. It is Frank Welker, who a lot of people know as the voice of Scooby-Doo. But he did both the animated film and the live-action film, very much in a James Earl Jones Mufasa sort of way. So,
and I like what they did with the cave. I don't know because I've heard people hate the fact that it didn't move its mouth. But I don't think that would have translated well to live action had it been an actual talking cave. So I was fine with it, but a lot of people weren't. Were you okay with it?
You know what's interesting about that is I didn't even notice because I had become so used to the stage version of the Cave of Wonders, which does not move its mouth. So to me, I didn't even notice that there was a difference. Now, when you say that, I do remember in the animated film that the mouth moves, but I just didn't... I didn't even notice it. So that's interesting that some people found that to be strange.
Yeah.
I get it, but that's interesting to me.
I was fine with it.
Yeah. One of the things that...
It made logical sense.
Yeah. One of the things that drove me a little bit crazy was... So in the animated films, the warning when Aladdin goes into the Cave of Wonders is don't touch anything other than the lamp. And in the animated film, he doesn't. Yet... Like
they touched stuff.
He touched a lot of stuff, and he had to because not like he was grabbing it and throwing it in his pocket, but more like he had to climb over jewels and such to get to where he needed to go. So he was touching stuff, and so that
wasn't there something that either the monkey or him actually did grab something? I think I could be wrong, but then it made me and I was like, wait, isn't that the whole thing that you can't touch anything?
So that's the moment when stuff goes wrong, is when Abu goes and grabs that big red jewel, and I'm like, why is this jewel any different than the others that they touched? It was very, I don't know, I was just like, what are they thinking here? This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So
I think it would have worked a little better because in the cartoon, and again it was a big part of the video game, that specific, it's almost like don't touch any of the stuff that's like on display, because the jewels very obviously like something on display in the cartoon, versus in this one, I think because they didn't give, and I think it was probably the right call, but because they didn't make it like this glorious diamond on a monkey statue, that's what caused the confusion.
But even in the animated film, they don't touch anything.
Do they step on it? I didn't pay attention to that.
No.
But I don't think they even step on anything in the animation.
They don't, because if they did...
He's climbing over and knocking, coins everywhere.
It was it was such a weird choice.
He's a good climber, though, in the live action. Like, man, he's got skills. No steps or anything. It's just,
Yeah, he had some acrobatic skills for sure, even during One Jump Ahead, which I want to get back to real quickly, because One Jump Ahead is a great number. The reprise of One Jump Ahead is actually like my favorite song on Aladdin. But how did you feel about this musical number specifically? Because like the sped up film, in general, let's just take a moment and say, in general, the musical numbers in this film felt like they stopped the movie for a minute and shot a music video and then went back to the movie. I think that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I think the best, and again, my favorite sequence in the whole movie was the Cave of Wonders. Other than that, most of the musical numbers, the segue did not feel natural, whereas in the cartoon, and again, you can get away with a lot more in a cartoon, but they felt very natural and flowed with the plot, whereas with this, I agree, and that part of had to do with the fact that because the one jump happens with Jasmine, and I really think that's part of why it felt very like whoa, okay, we're in a musical number, because we didn't begin with that as beginning to learn this character. We were, but yeah, I guess I didn't bring it up, but I do not think Guy Ritchie, I think he did a good job overall. Way better than I thought, because I've never really been a fan of his movies all that much. At first I was like, what are they thinking? I think he did an overall okay job, aside from maybe directing the actors and staging, because I think, again, sometimes I felt like I was watching like a play with the staging was awkward. But he has this weird obsession with fast forwarding things.
Yeah.
And it was very, I didn't notice it. Did you see it in 3D or 2D?
I saw it in 2D.
Okay, because like I saw it in 2D and I only noticed it I think twice, but I have a friend who saw it in 3D and he said he noticed it like 10 times, that weird slowing down, speeding up, fast forward, rewind.
Yeah. There was a moment where I loved it, and this is going way further in the film, and this is when Aladdin is tied to the chair and pushed into the ocean, and they had like this slow-mo shot of him falling back, and I thought it was cool.
That worked.
But
that was very good.
Yeah, I really liked that visually. But during One Jump Ahead, it happened a lot, and I was like, I don't like this. I don't think I like this. It just felt like a music video.
I feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, and then like those electronic sounds that they added to the song, I don't know if I liked. Now, overall, what I do love about these live action remakes is they tend to take the musical scores from the films and really put a lot of like life and energy into them, and I love that. And I think they did that with Aladdin, but they also added a lot of electronic sounds, and I still don't know how I felt about it. Part of me, I think I didn't like it so much in the movie, but as a separate track listening to it, I think it's kind of fun.
Well, they did that with, as a kid, I had no problem with it, but now I probably would have. But with Phantom of the Opera, with Gerard Butler,
that was...
People had a lot of issues because there was a lot of electric guitar.
But it is in the original score for Phantom of the Opera. That's actually... Now, I expected the opposite from Phantom of the Opera because that musical was created in the 80s, at which point synthesizers were very popular. So one of the things I was actually looking forward to at the Phantom of the Opera movie was, I was like, oh, great, they'll be able to update the score, get rid of these cheesy electronic sounds and bring in more strings and stuff, and they didn't. They stayed like faithful to that cheesy electronic sound, and I hated it, but that's a whole other thing. As I was watching One Jump Ahead, I will say, did it kind of feel a little bit like you were watching the Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular? Because it did to me.
I didn't think of that, but now that you mention it, 100%.
I was like, because they could easily put an Aladdin stunt show on the sets.
They just shot it over at MGM or at Hollywood Studios. They're like, guys, we're going to save a couple thousand. Let's just use their sets.
See, they still do shoot stuff over at Disney's Hollywood Studios. Oh, man, that was funny. Now, I got to talk about a scene that was one of my favorites in the film, and I already know you're going to say you hated it.
Uh-oh.
But the scene between Aladdin and Jafar in the desert, where Jafar's talking about, he's like, we're not much different. I was a street rat too. I thought was such a great moment between those two characters that like we never see. Because in the animated film, Jonathan Freeman as Jafar is magnificent. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
I love his performance. But it just doesn't, you don't have as much time to develop the character. Whereas Jafar felt more like a real person to me in this. And although the actor playing him was so opposite of the booming voice of Jonathan Freeman, which at first I had a hard time accepting, like in the trailers and stuff, I really liked it in this film. And I know you did not like this performance.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because that scene between him and the desert was the only scene I loved of him. So you had me scared there because I was like, I don't want to, but no, because I liked that they approached, I had to kind of rethink about it. It grew on me a little bit after I saw the movie and I put a tweet out and then one of my friends said something like, we didn't need another mustache twirling villain and it wouldn't have translated well to the screen. I'm like, I agree.
Yeah.
So that scene I actually really did like because again, in the cartoon, he never really not connects, but you know what I mean? He just doesn't have that much with Aladdin that isn't like the menacing, crazy old.
Totally.
But I really liked it. I liked that he, did that they made the bracelet like a interesting kind of, not a MacGuffin, but a little thing. And I like how he like swipes it from him and he's like, I too used to be like you. I actually really like that because it actually gave me some kind of feeling of where Jafar came from.
Yes.
That's like the only stuff I actually liked about him was the whole him having come from where Aladdin was and being tired of feeling like he's second best and almost like that's where Aladdin could become if you took the wrong path. Mm-hmm. I love that. I wish they had done more with it because the rest of his performance was just so bad in my opinion. Again, not on the actor. Maybe it was just the interpretation of it. I think he was going for just a very subdued kind of like calculated con man. But to me, like there's a part where Aladdin's trying to get out of the cave and he's just like, give me the lamp. And it's like the same urgency as saying, pass me the salt. Like it's just, but I did love that
I'm
scene.
glad that you liked that scene. I actually liked it so much. I went to a movie last night. I went to see Brightburn, which by the way, I loved.
I keep hearing about that. I need to look into it.
Gosh, I mean, it's a Superman if things went wrong. But as a horror fan, I thought it was so much fun. But in any case, I mentioned it because as I was leaving the theater, I walked by one of the other theaters was playing Aladdin, and I poked my head in, and it's that scene, and I was like, "Ooh, let me just stop and watch this scene." Like I love that scene. It was just such a wonderful moment, and I think that worked way better.
And this is where I give the movie props too. That worked way better than if I don't think him disguising himself as an old man would have worked at all in the live screen. So I think that was smart in going the direction they did with having him not be in the prison and then finding out it's Jasmine. So that's why the desert scene really worked for me, because I thought it was a very good example of making a change that worked.
And I also did find Jafar to be like legitimately intimidating in this movie. I was like, I wouldn't want to cross him. So I don't know. Overall, I really liked Jafar in this movie. And like I said, this is coming from a viewpoint of I actually really love Jafar in the animated film as well. Yeah. It's a very different version of Jafar, but I liked him. So I thought it was cool.
Yeah. It's a for me personally, like I said, other than that scene, and there was like a few bits here and there, but I just, for some reason, from the first trailer, I was like, what are they thinking? And I'm not saying it needed to be a mustache twirling villain and he didn't need to be crazy like Jafar, but I wanted something. Either I think they needed to develop the whole con man out. I think they either needed to develop his character more or just give the direction of the actor to put a little more oomph into his performance. But again, there's a million factors at play when it comes to characterization. It could be the director, it could be the editor chose could be that he gave that performance and the director later said, choose the most subdued performance he gave.
Yeah.
You never know,
It was interesting to me how important Iago was in this film.
You mean unimportant?
How important? No, really? You didn't think he was important?
In the live action?
Yeah, I thought there were so many moments where it was like Jafar got information because of Iago. Like, I feel like the story wouldn't have actually happened the way it did without Iago, whereas in the animated film, he's a sidekick.
I hadn't thought of that. I guess for me, the thing that stuck out was how they made him, because in the animated film, he has like the two personalities. He has the one that he kind of acts around normal people where he's just being a parrot. And then he has the Iago we know and love. And they chose to completely remove that from the movie, maybe because it wouldn't have translated well to live action.
Now initially, once again, obviously I just really like the animated film, but initially I was like, couldn't we just get Gilbert Gottfried again?
But not with after the controversy,
No, well, that's long past, in my opinion.
I think people would have been really mad because he said some pretty nasty things.
He's a comedian. That's what they do.
That's true.
I give full pass.
But the internet nowadays, look at what happened to James Gunn. Like
I understand. The world we live in is a little bit too sensitive in my mind, and if things are said for entertainment purposes,
it's a double-edged sword. Because I would have, yes, of course, I would love to have seen him return because he's such an iconic voice. But I see why Disney was like, we're not touching that with a 10-foot pole.
Until you just said that, I didn't even think about it because, I listened to his podcast and stuff, and it was so long ago. And like I said, the man's a comedian. Like, comedians say offensive things. That's just the reality of it. And whether you like it or not, you don't have to like it. But I don't know. To ruin somebody's career over it is just crazy to me.
I'm not into cancel culture at all, and I'm not into the whole ruining someone's career. I'm just saying from a business point of view, I understand why they didn't.
Yeah, totally. And I honestly hadn't thought of that. But putting all that aside, I actually think it would have been a bad choice, having now seen the film, because Iago, he wasn't a sidekick. He was a very, I'm not going to say central, but he was important to the situations that happened in that film. And it actually shocked me. Like, every few minutes, it felt like I was like, oh my gosh, Iago made sure this happened. This happened because Iago, blah, blah, back and forth. And I was like, yeah, go next time you watch it, notice that because it's interesting.
I think they had to compensate with the fact that he wasn't like, okay, if we're going to remove the personality, we have to give him something more than just repeating,
I do want to talk about Jasmine's music for a second because Jasmine, the history of like Jasmine and Aladdin is really, really fascinating to me because in the animated film, she has no solo. Of course, she's part of A Whole New World, but it's a duet. And then for Aladdin, a musical spectacular, Disney California Adventure, they wrote that song for her called To Be Free. And then in the Broadway musical, they wrote a song for her called These Palace Walls. Now, in my opinion, those two songs I just mentioned, neither of them really stuck out to me as being all that great. And then in this live action version, we get another song now called Speechless. And I am curious what you thought of that.
I thought the song itself was good. I think it was a little obvious they were trying to give a Let It Go. It had that kind of vibe. I thought the actress sang it amazingly well. That was my other issue, I guess, was that her voice was so incredible, and the actor who played Aladdin's wasn't as much, that sometimes it felt a little disjointed. Sure. I was fine with the song. I just felt that, especially with the second iteration, that it kind of grinded the story and what was going on to like a halt.
Yeah.
I thought this is where I hope I don't come across as like the wrong way, but I just felt it was maybe a little heavy-handed in the movie, just a little bit, with like 2 musical numbers and like 3 scenes about the, I will not be silenced, and I didn't remember this from the animated film, but there is a line, and I wrote this down because I was kind of like, where are they getting this stuff from? And there is a line in the animation where the Sultan is like, oh, you're going to marry Jafar. And she's like, what? And then he's like, speechless, I see a fine quality in a wife. I was like, ooh, Disney. I didn't realize they put that in the animation.
That's interesting, and I did not pick up on that. That's fascinating. That
was, my ears perked up, but I feel like they almost, and again, I really hope I'm not coming across wrong or improper, but I just felt like it was a little too heavy-handed, and it could have been a little more subtle to get the point across than. But again, I totally understand if people loved it. It was I'm not the aim for that.
To me, it just felt out of place. It felt like a music video stuck in the middle of the movie, but I did like the song quite a bit.
Oh yeah. But on its own, yeah. As like a standalone track, I really liked it. I don't like musical numbers, and kind of like what you said earlier, where you have the story going on and it does nothing to progress. Like, One Jump is a good example of one that progresses the story. And Prince Ali, everything kind of progresses the story, but those two her songs literally take the story and grind it to like a halt. Yeah. That was my more issue with it, I guess.
But they did do a very interesting thing with Jasmine, where like, for a long time, even before the animated Aladdin, there's the complaint of, why are these girls just chasing men? Like, that seems to be their whole purpose in life. Right. And when Jasmine came along, she kind of became a role model for girls, because that was not the case of Jasmine in Aladdin. She was not just there swooning over the guys.
She was strongly written for a 90s cartoon. She was very well, written.
And then they took it to the next level in this live action film, because they added this other point that isn't in the animated film, where not only, so in the animated film, she's fighting to, marry somebody she actually loves. She just doesn't want the next pretty rich guy that comes through the door. But in this live action film, it's not just about marrying the man she loves. It's about, no, I can rule. I can, sit on the throne here. And that's a very like 21st century, girl power type of statement to make. And I found that to be really, really interesting and really smart, and something that, updated the film and made it current. So
I think interesting and smart is a very good way to put it. I was more indifferent. It was one of those things where I saw it, and maybe it's because I come from the filmmaking background where I'm like, they know what they're doing. It sounds very cynical, but sometimes that stuff is calculated and they do it for a reason. Sure. And, whether I've seen too much of the behind the scenes stuff to know that a lot of the times it can be manipulative, of like the audience, and maybe it's not necessarily part of, I really had no problem with it overall. Logically, I mean, it makes sense to throw in a new twist, rather than, the only other option would have him become Sultan, and I see why they did it.
With these live action films, I always actually am looking for a new little twist, and like you said, it has to be close to the original that people love. But in this, we got that. We got the little twist of her fighting for the throne, and then, as I mentioned at the beginning, we get the twist of that's the genie and his family. Actually, at the beginning of the film, that
And I like that.
I did like those little unique touches to it. Now, something I just want to talk about a musical moment. Are you familiar with "Proud of Your Boy"? I know you don't really like theater that much, but
no.
Okay. So, "Proud of Your Boy" is a great song that was written for the animated film that never made it into the animated film, was brought into the Broadway musical, and sadly taken out of this film. It's a great song for Aladdin. It always kills me, though, because they take out these great songs from the Broadway musicals, but they still play them in the background score. And I'm like, why are you? It's just putting a dagger in my heart. I'm like, it's bad enough you took it out of the film, but now you're just going to like tease it in the background. It drives me crazy that they did that. But I do have to say, we didn't talk at all about A Whole New World or Friend Like Me. And I think A Whole New World works better in the animated film. And
of course, you can't top that. There's no way. That's such an iconic and memorable scene.
And same with Friend Like Me. Like, I really did not need any beatboxing in Friend Like Me. Like, not necessary.
It's weird the things that I'm okay with, or not okay with. It's weird the things that didn't bother me. Because again, other than the whole don't touch the treasure thing, which I remember watching, I was a little confused because it's like, wait, they can't touch it, but they're touching everything. Is it, whatever. But overall, the whole Cave of Wonders sequence, I really enjoyed it. And I was actually surprised how much I enjoyed Friend Like Me. I was ready to hate it because I'm like, what are they going to do? But I thought it was funny. I like what they did with Abu. I thought that was pretty funny. And I know it was like modernized with him playing the drums, but I don't know. I was oddly okay with it, and I really enjoyed the musical number as a whole.
What'd you think of the reprise of it or the encore of it at the end of the film?
Oh, you mean the credits one with DJ Khaled or whatever? I think we left a little soon because we were trying to get to the parking lot before we were getting mauled by the crowd. But I guess for me, anything that happens after the movie, if it's like in the credits, I kind of don't include that in my opinion of like the movie. But I know a lot of people had kind of issues with that, I think.
I will say I absolutely loved the credits version of A Whole New World with Zayn and Xavier Ward. I think I actually prefer it to the one from not the one in the movie, but the credits one from the animated film.
I'd have to rewatch that or listen to that one again, but yeah, I liked it. Aside from the first Arabian Nights with Will Smith, which I was kind of like, this is not great singing. Every other musical number, even with Jasmine's, I thought they were all sang very well, and they were all very well done. That was my weird issue with Whole New World, is that I'm too used to the original where both the singer of Jasmine and Aladdin have such incredible singing voices, but then in the live action one, Jasmine had an incredible voice and the guy who played Aladdin not so much. A lot of it was what I like to call like talk singing, like I can show you the world, rather than more of a vibrato, but I was okay with it. It was still magical,
But yeah, other than that, the one thing I would have to take note on is I don't think the animals looked great, which is so weird to me because you've got the same company making these incredible CG characters in the Lion King film, and in Aladdin, like every time I saw the elephant or the tiger or the monkey, I was like, oh, they don't look great in my opinion.
I guess I didn't pay much. It didn't take you out of the film. Stand out to me. Yeah, because there are some, movies where it really does. But I was actually surprised how little, again, kind of similar to Iago, Raj really didn't play much of a role. And again, that comes to the fact that they totally skip, her escaping the palace. That whole thing's kind of rewritten, which is fine. I'm curious, though, because I've heard people didn't like it. What did you think of the scene inside the chamber with the jams and the whole joke? I really liked it. I thought it was hilarious, but a lot of people
I thought it was funny. Like I said, I really think the actor who played Aladdin was very charming.
That was my favorite scene of his. I thought he nailed between him and Will Smith and his like under the breath comments.
Yeah, and those I didn't care for so much, but the Aladdin stuff I thought was really funny. I could see how some people would think it was ridiculous or over the top or maybe not necessary or something. I could see that, but I thought that there were funny moments, and I don't know. By the end of the movie, I was like, yeah, this Aladdin, he's a pretty cool guy.
That was in terms of his comedic timing and everything, I thought. And even Jasmine, like just the play back and forth. Oh, so you can buy me? No, yes. Like they took that from the animation, and I think it was actually kind of brave on Disney to amplify that a bit, because it's kind of mentioned briefly in the cartoon, but they really sell it, and the audience was kind of like, ooh. Like, when he's like, yes, I want to buy you. No, wait, I don't. But I really like that. The other thing I wanted to ask, again, because I've heard other people say, what did you think about them turning the Sultan from this kind of bumbling, very likable, adorable guy in the cartoon to just a very non-character? Like, he's just kind of there and doesn't really have a presence.
I didn't feel like he was a non-character. He was definitely different, but I cared about him, I will say. As I was watching the film, and when he was like derobed and Jafar took his
right, yeah.
I cared about the fact that happened. So yeah, I don't know. I didn't miss the bumbling. I love the bumbling fool that we have in the animated film.
Yeah.
But
that's just what I know. When watching the animation again, I was like, wow, they changed. Of all the characters, that's probably the most drastic. Again, I don't know if it would have translated well. You would have had to get like a Danny DeVito. And of course, he was already doing Dumbo. But I just thought that was one of the more drastic. Obviously, he's not like the main character, but it was a pretty big change. And I was just curious because,
Anything else you want to add about the live action Aladdin before we get to some trivia?
I think that's pretty much it.
I think that means it's trivia time! All right, do you want to hit me with a trivia question first, or shall I hit you?
I'll hit you with one. You might know this, but I thought it was pretty interesting because I didn't realize this. So there's an actor who really campaigned hard to be the character of Jafar in the live action version. And he actually has ties to the animated movie, which is what makes it interesting. Do you know who that actor is?
To play Jafar, you said?
Yep, in the live action version.
So it wasn't Jonathan Freeman, the voice of the original Jafar?
No, it was someone who would
related
been
to
very interesting.
I mean, gosh, I hope it wasn't Gilbert Gottfried.
No. That'd be hilarious, though.
Who in the original... When you say tied to, was he a voice actor in the original animated?
He was tied to the animated animated film because he turned down the role of Jafar, and he regretted it ever since. And he lobbied
I feel
to
like
play
I've
Jafar.
heard this before. And was it Jim Carrey? No.
He was considered for Genie,
Genie.
which would have
That's
been
what I was thinking of.
interesting.
Yeah. Actually, to be honest, I wouldn't have been sad if like Jim Carrey tried to do Genie in this one.
That would have been,
like I said, it goes against everything I said. I don't want a comedian or a comedic actor in that role, but that would have been interesting. Oh gosh, I feel like I have heard this, but I cannot recall. Who was
Star
it?
Trek.
Star Trek. Oh, the bald guy, Patrick Stewart.
Yep. Yeah, he turned down the role of Jafar in the original.
That's right.
And it says he regretted it ever since. And then so he really was campaigning to get in the live action, but obviously they went with someone else.
Isn't that interesting? Clearly a bigger star than they wanted, younger, I guess, but that's really actually probably more ethnically accurate is what they were going for.
I think that's probably because that was something they had to take very seriously with this one, because especially in today's climate. I remember there were rumors that there were darkening actors on set.
There was an issue with casting. I remember there being a big deal and the media getting crazy about it, and then them going on a major search for Jasmine and Aladdin. I do remember that. That's
one thing I'll add, and I was going to ask your opinion, because one thing that kind of bothered me about the live action was that everything seemed way too new, the clothes, and nothing really seemed worn, whereas like, I don't know, I felt like it should have been a little dirtier, a little grittier, maybe. Does that anything that stuck out to you while you were watching it?
No, other than the palace, which I think wouldn't be new and
right,
beautiful.
Yeah, but like in the streets
I didn't feel that way. I'd have to pay attention to that on a second viewing, but I didn't feel that way. I know a lot of people are upset that Aladdin had a shirt in the movie. That was like a big deal.
Because even in the Broadway or in the stage versions, he doesn't have a shirt, right?
I can't even remember, to be honest.
Or he has the vest.
He has the vest, but I can't remember.
They just said it would have been they thought it would have been too distracting, and actually kind of
I love
agree.
that. His chest would have been too distracting.
Yeah, and
I will not disagree.
And then some fans were like, "Oh, he's probably just some scrawny little wimp," and then he like showed on like Instagram or something that he's like ripped, and so it's like, well, that wasn't the issue.
That's funny.
Those are the kind of non-issues for me.
Yeah.
I see why people, because it's the iconic look, but yeah.
I have a question for you that I'll be surprised if you know the answer, considering I'm going to assume the first time you saw Aladdin was on VHS, probably, right?
Probably, yeah.
Okay, so did you ever have the cassette soundtrack by any chance?
I probably did.
Okay,
at some
then
point.
maybe you know this then. Because, of course, the first song we hear in the film is Arabian Nights, and the first lyrics go, "Oh, I come from a land, from a faraway place, where the caravan camels roam." And we grew up with the VHS hearing the next lyrics being, "Where it's flat and immense, and the heat is intense, it's barbaric, but hey, it's home." Do you know what those original lyrics were when the film was in theaters, as well as the original cassette? And the original cassette and maybe even the original CD. It was totally different, and they had to change the lyrics because it was considered insensitive.
I was going to say it's got to be something racist.
Yeah.
Or I have no idea, but
Okay.
I imagine it is something that has to do with yeah.
Okay. So the lyrics are, "Where they cut off your ear if they don't like your face, it's barbaric, but hey, it's home." And those were the lyrics that played in the theater when the film first came out.
Different. It was the 90s, man. Like different times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, but this was
Wow, I
pretty
didn't know
immediate.
that.
Like this was, they got a lot of heat for it back in '92 when it came out, to the point that so the film in theaters couldn't be changed. It was too late.
Right.
And then the cassette couldn't be changed. It was too late. But when it came out on VHS initially, that was the first time when we heard the new lyrics, "Where it's flat and immense and the heat is intense, it's barbaric."
What about the CD? Was it changed for that?
I can't remember if the CD, when the heck were CDs big? I think the original CD, because I have both versions in my iTunes, because I just find the history of the song to be fascinating.
Oh, so you can find it still, the original version.
I mean, I have it. I'm pretty sure you can. But any new release of it is the flat and immense and the heat is intense. And they changed it yet again for the live action film. So for the film we just saw, it goes, "Oh, I come from a land, from a faraway place, where the caravan camels roam. Where you wander among every culture and tongue. It's chaotic, but hey, it's home." So I found that even more interesting because,
It's a tongue twister.
yeah, so the first time around, they said the whole, cutting off the ear if they don't like your face is offensive. So they changed that. But this time around, they not only changed that, but they also got rid of the word "it's barbaric, but hey, it's home" to "it's chaotic, but hey, it's home." So I just found it so interesting and so fascinating. And
Well, what's interesting is if they really thought that was going to be offensive to anyone, because that's kind of a stretch to just say it's
to
I
call
guess
the
maybe
people
because-
barbaric for what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very, very interesting to me. But in any case, this has been a fun little conversation about Aladdin, this new 2019 live action version. Before you go, Mark, why don't you let folks know where they can find you and the fabulous work that you do?
Well, if you don't hate me from my somewhat negative opinions on this, you can find my channel on YouTube where we explore mostly theme park subjects of the past, abandoned rides, canceled rides, unbuilt rides, attractions at Universal and Disney. But you can find me at YouTube at it's called Yesterworld Entertainment, and the URL is just youtube.com/Yesterworld Entertainment. You can also find me on Twitter at Yester_world. And you can find my co-host Quinn of the Yesterworld podcast, which you can also check out on iTunes. And you can follow him at Yester_world_Q.
And your latest video is actually a really good one about the Alice in Wonderland dark ride at Disneyland Park and the history of that. So I know a lot of people, that's like their favorite dark ride at Disneyland. So if you enjoy that, make sure you check out Yesterworld on YouTube. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Mark.
Thank you, and for inviting me. It was I always love talking about movies, for better or worse, and the pros and the cons and everything.
And before we get going, I want to remind all of you about a change of schedule this upcoming week for Disney Coast to Coast related to the opening of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. For the next 2 Sundays, I will not be releasing the normal House of Mouse Headlines episodes. Instead, I will be releasing 5 new episodes, all related to and focusing on a different topic about Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. This new land really is a huge event for Disney parks, arguably the biggest event to happen in the Disney parks since I began Disney Coast to Coast back in 2014. Disneyland's 60th anniversary was pretty darn huge, but as far as the creation of a new land is concerned, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge takes the cake. So I'm happy to say that I will be visiting Black Spire Outpost on the planet of Batuu on opening day, May 31st, 2019. After visiting this epic new land with friends, I will be recording episodes of DCTC about our experiences to release the following week. So the first episode, all about Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, is scheduled to be released sometime on Saturday, June 1st, 2019. Every other day after that, there will be a Star Wars Galaxy's Edge episode released on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then wrapping things up on Sunday, June 9th, 2019. After that, things will go back to normal on the following Wednesday, and the House of Mouse Headlines will return on Sunday, June 16th. So be sure to keep your eyes on your Disney Coast to Coast podcast feed for new episodes all about Star Wars Galaxy's Edge all week long. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now would be a good time to do so. Also, don't forget to head over to DisneyCoastToCoast.com and sign up for the music playlist. There is a new one coming out in the new month, so make sure you do that over at DisneyCoastToCoast.com, where you can also find our social media links. And of course, don't forget to leave those 5-star ratings and reviews on iTunes to help other Disney fans find the show more easily. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!
Thanks for listening to Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.
Disney Coast to Coast is produced and hosted by Jeff DePauli. Learn more about the podcast and become a supporter at DisneyCoastToCoast.com.